And with me tonight, the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, James Cleverly, the barrister and human rights campaigner, now Labour's Shadow Attorney General, Shami Chakrabarti, the SNP defence spokesman, Stuart MacDonald, the journalist and transgender activist, Paris Lees, and the writer and columnist for The Mail on Sunday, Peter Hitchens. And as ever, you can, of course, join in the debate using hashtag BBCQT on social media. I was going to say Facebook, but I shall now say just social media to take part in this discussion. Right, let's have our first question tonight, which comes from Christina Fleischer. Oh, well, here we go.
Should I delete Facebook?
Should I delete Facebook in the light of everything that's happened? Peter Hitchens.
It's a bit late now. This is the whole problem with this fuss. They know everything about you already. And what did you think you were doing when you signed up to these things? Did you think all these wonderful free things that came your way were there because they liked you? I don't think so. They were there because they were always after harvesting information from people, and that's what they do. And this is the way in which Big Brother comes to an advanced free society. We're invited to dob ourselves in and tell them everything about us that they want to know, and then they will sell us things, but maybe other, more sinister results will follow. I don't know why people are so willing to let it happen.
But were you surprised to discover Cambridge Analytica was using this stuff to try and influence elections, supposedly?
Well, not in the slightest. I think there's an element in this of the poor, pathetic Hillary Clinton problem, which is that she was the only person, probably in the Western Hemisphere, who could have lost an election to Donald Trump because she was Hillary Clinton. But she's ever since been trying to find an excuse for this, which doesn't involve her. It's the Russians, or it's Facebook, or it's somebody else. And I tend to write that off. I think she lost the election because she was Hillary Clinton, and I think we shouldn't give Facebook or Cambridge Analytica or anybody else any more credit than they should have for that. Hillary Clinton lost the election, and that's how it happened, and she lost it because she was Hillary, and she should get over it.
Okay. Paris Lees, back to the question, should I delete Facebook? Are you on Facebook?
Well, I am, but I've not really used it since my mum joined, actually. I'm more of an Instagram kind of girl, so do follow me. I think, actually, when Facebook came out, you know, it's done an awful lot of good, and it's helped connect a lot of communities that were very isolated before. You know, I probably would never have been on the show if it wasn't for social media, let's face it, you know. So, you know, give it its credit. But I think the idea that, you know, it's all about coming together and sharing and, you know, a bit of a hippie kind of ideal, really, is now starting to look like a kind of broken dream. And I think that they're just behaving in the way that all of these horrible multinational corporate companies are acting. And I think they need to take accountability. And I think that, you know, in Mark Zuckerberg's statement, he hasn't apologised. He hasn't said that he's sorry. And it's kind of amazing that he goes around, you know, this is a company that controls so much information about, you know, like a quarter of the world's population, the way that we interact with each other, where we are, where we check in, our political views. And there's no accountability, and we say, oh, let them get on with it. And actually, I think we need to be a little bit harsher with them, and I think we all need to be a little bit more aware of what we're putting out there.
He did say, yeah. He did say it was a major breach of trust, and he was really sorry it happened. I don't know if that counts as a proper apology. What do you think, Christina Fleischer? You asked the question. What's your view?
Well, I've already deleted Facebook, actually, mainly because I think it's a waste of time.
When did you do that? Yesterday or...?
A month ago. Completely unrelated to this.
Before this thing started?
But I wish I'd never got it in the first place, Peter.
But how easy was it to actually do that? Because I've heard of people really struggling to properly delete, as opposed to suspend.
It is difficult. Facebook doesn't let you delete Messenger. I've tried, and it does not let you delete it. What I actually did is I tried to delete it, but I accidentally pressed this is temporary. So it reactivates your profile within 7 days, and it's very creepy. They list all your friends and they say, you know, Claire will miss you, Anushka will miss you, these people will miss you.
They really
say that. They're really trying to grab you, and it's creepy.
Are you on Facebook?
I have never been on Facebook. I'm a bit of a tin hatter, OK, so I'm not qualified to really answer your question. I've never been on Facebook. I don't tweet. I don't do any of these things, but I do recognise the Paris story and the story of so many millions of people. This has been democratising for them. It's been great for activism and information sharing and so on. But we've got to get to a better place. We've got to have a better, more equal relationship with social media because, as Paris said, they're abusing young people's trust. I think that government needs to step up on, James, step up on data protection, and I think consumers of social media need to take more control. And maybe new platforms need to emerge that sell themselves on the basis of their ethics and not just on the basis of convenience and consumerism.
I'll come to you in a moment, but James Cleverly, from the government's point of view, what can you do or what should you do?
Well, look, it's worth bearing in mind that I'm a bit older than the average age of the audience, and I remember the time before, not just social media, but before the internet. And I used to work in the publishing industry, from magazine publishing and then digital publishing. And one of the things I used to remind people was that if you're getting something for free across the internet, it's because you are the product. You are the valuable asset. Christina, you are still a valuable asset, which is why Facebook tries so very, very hard to get you back engaged. And the choice you need to make is how much of a product you want to be, because you are providing something valuable every time you check in, every time you like something, every time you express.
But do you do all this? Are you on Facebook?
I am on.
Do you tweet?
I am on Facebook, and I'm very aware. I do tweet. I'm on Instagram. I'm on a lot of these
Are
things.
you Insta famous?
No. No, I'm
Why
Insta.
do you do all this then?
Look, I enjoy it.
Do you feel you're being exploited? Do you feel you're being used? Do you
no,
feel
because
people
I'm very
are marketing you.
No, because I'm very conscious of, for me, what is the offer and what is the ask.
Okay.
So the offer to me is that I can keep in touch with people. All of the politicians around the table, we work funny hours and do funny things. I love my job. I don't begrudge that, but it does mean I miss family events, and this is a good way of keeping in contact.
What funny things do you do?
I've
never heard a politician say they do funny things.
We wait
People
until...
accuse them of doing funny things.
We wait until
midnight.
We wait until midnight before voting
when
and that kind of...
vampires are out.
Vampires.
Okay, I'll come to you now. You, yes.
So there's been a lot of talk about we need to do something about it, and what can the government do? I haven't heard any actual answers. Should everything be left up to the individual to prevent their data from being exploited, or can the government do anything? Or
Okay, Stuart McDonald. I should just explain, by the way, because we were talking about Facebook and things, that which I did in the beginning, that our audience is entirely under 30 years old here in Leeds tonight, so that we're hearing from that generation. That was the point of this programme. Stuart.
Well, I did delete Facebook around about a year ago, and that was largely because I was fed up of it trying to sell me things, because that wasn't why I joined it. I joined it, much like everyone, I'm sure, to keep in touch with friends, family, and whatever else. But James says that it's clear to you what the offer is when you join. Well, this scandal makes clear to us that the offer is far from clear when we join, because I am quite certain that nobody joined it to have their data harvested and used to manipulate the outcome of elections right across the world. I don't recall seeing that. Maybe I'm the only one, but I don't recall seeing that put to me when I signed up to Facebook. And what a tangled web of deception that has been woven between social media companies like Facebook and this shadowy company, Cambridge Analytica, with links all over the world that are highly questionable. Links to, we heard in the House of Commons yesterday, through the parent company, the current Conservative Party too. But Shami is correct. The government does need to get this right. And it also cuts to the issue of cyberbullying. Too often, these social media platforms want to say, nothing to do with me, Gov. I'm afraid it is. And don't be fooled.
Okay.
When Mr. Zuckerberg comes before Parliament, don't be fooled by the Bambi-eyed deception that he too often tries to cut, because I'm afraid he's looking like a dishonest broker at the moment.
Right. You sit there.
Just to Shami's point about we need to have a more equal relationship with these companies. We do have an equal relationship. We have the freedom to consent. And if you choose, when it tells you, I accept the terms and conditions, if you choose to tick that box, you're consenting to what it says in the terms and conditions. If you haven't read that, that is not the company's problem. That's your problem. They'll take you to court and they'll go through all of this with you.
But do you really think that's informed consent for most people? And do you really think that,
yes,
that young people have a genuine choice? I'm not convinced.
I'm sorry. It actually is a genuine choice. Everybody can read and they can go through the terms and conditions if they choose to.
All right, the woman in the fourth row there. No, in the middle, bang in the middle there. Yeah.
I think a few people in this generation are probably going to disagree with my point on this, but I do feel at the moment we are living in an age where we have smart technologies and all these amazing, wonderful, weird things that we can access on the internet, but people are not receiving the right information to understand what the consequences of things are. I signed up to Facebook about 10 years ago when it first came out, and there's things on all sorts of apps like memories and things that you come up and you think, oh my God, I actually put that out. You know, you expect it for, like, your friends to see it, but then 10 years later it comes up on your Facebook profile again, and it's like, oh my God, I'm so drunk in a field at
And you should
like
have
15.
a right to be forgotten, perhaps.
Yeah.
You should have a right to demand that material be deleted. And I also think that what's illegal in the real world should be properly illegal in the virtual world, and that means government should invest in law enforcement.
All right. Peter Hitchens. Is there anything governments can do or should do?
No, I can think of only one way of making it worse, and that's for the government to get involved.
Why is that?
Well, the governments do make everything worse. And the example of China, which of course intervenes like anything in the internet, doesn't seem to appeal very
Peter,
much.
if your briefcase was stolen, you would expect the police to do something about it. And if your data is stolen in the online sphere, government has a duty to do law enforcement as well.
Stolen, but
yes.
as it's been pointed out, people sign up for this voluntarily. It's not stolen; they give it away. If you leave your car in the street with the keys in the lock, the person who takes it away hasn't stolen it.
They didn't give it to Cambridge Analytica. They didn't give it to Cambridge Analytica, though, did they?
If you give your information to these companies, then they haven't stolen it.
James Cleverly, Stuart mentioned the Tory party being involved with, I don't know what we were alleging.
Well, it was raised in Prime Minister's questions yesterday by the leader of the SNP that the parent company of Cambridge Analytica is heavily involved with the Conservative Party.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, there's someone who's given £700,000 who's involved with the parent company.
Well, they all went to
donation.
Eton together, didn't they?
A bunch of the cabinet went to school with them, I understand as well. But this is, I mean, I don't mean to sound...
Sorry. You said something which you now appear to be backing off.
No, I don't appear to be backing off at all.
Sorry, are you saying that Cambridge Analytica, which is coming for a lot of stick, is being used by the Tory party in elections or something like that, or are you just saying they get money from Cambridge Analytica?
Well, we know that discussions happen between the Conservative Party and Cambridge Analytica, but the parent company are the ones with the connections where the donation came from that amounted to £700,000. We know that a former Conservative Party treasurer, I believe it was involved in the parent company. We know that the former secretary of, I think it was the Oxford Conservative Association, was involved in the parent company of Cambridge Analytica.
So what were you saying? This was illegal, wrong, improper, immoral, or
David,
just something...
I merely highlight the fact...
Well, you can't just merely...
But I'll say this, as with every corporate scandal, the things you hear in the first week are always only the tip of the iceberg. Data is the new gold.
Okay.
Data is the new oil. Expect this to go further.
Okay, I know it's... let me make it very, very clear. The Conservative Party has never used Cambridge Analytica. That's a fact. And it's, you very elegantly dropped a whole load of stones in the pond implying impropriety and then reined back from actually having the courage to actually make an accusation. So let me make it very clear. We have never, the Conservative Party has never used Cambridge Analytica. Now, the point I was going to make is that the demographic that we have represented in our audience this evening, I'm sorry to say this to you, you are going to historically have had the hardest time in terms of your relationship with the internet, because people of my age, it all kind of happened after our youthful indiscretions, and the generation that comes after you will have learnt from the trials and tribulations that you will have all gone through. And as a government, we are incredibly conscious of that, which is why we are absolutely taking social media platforms to task about things like online bullying, about the ethics of what data is kept and used about you. The party, the government, is taking this incredibly seriously. You talk about online bullying. The Conservative Party recognises that in the political discourse, this is an incredibly significant event, which is why we brought in a respect pledge to say that our candidates at the forthcoming local elections and beyond should conduct themselves online in an appropriate manner. And we will take action if they don't. And as yet, I'm not hearing any other party match that commitment.
All right. I want to go... There are a number of people with their hands up, and I want to go around a bit. I'll come to you first in the front here. Just a comment, if you would. And then I'll come to you up there, and I'll go to the back there. Yes.
Why has the government not acted to better regulate these sites? I mean, they seem to not really be in control of the situation at the moment, and the public have signed up to these sites, but they haven't signed up to scandals such as the recent one.
What kind of regulation would you want to see?
I want to see more data protection for the people that deserve it, and also a lot of inappropriate posts are still going on, and these should be banned.
OK. And the person there in the middle, you, yes.
If we're being encouraged to delete Facebook, do you think we need to have a look at companies like Google that record everything about us? And I don't think that's something that the public is made aware of. Use information because you use Google for accessing anything. Yeah, for everything.
Yes. All right, and the man there in the... Yes, you?
Yep. As a school teacher, we, on a daily basis, have to deal with the issues of social media. And I don't think it's just about education for us as teachers. We have Internet Safety Day once a year, but I think the companies themselves have to do more to educate the young people that are using it, because it's not just online bullying, but it's other situations that the young people get themselves into because they don't really understand the implications of the way that they use the social media.
On balance, do you think social media is a good thing for society? Or do you think it's...
I think if it's used in the correct way, it can be very useful. I know in sort of times of disaster like flooding, social media has come to the forefront of bringing communities together, but it needs to be used correctly, and I think young people need to be educated on how to use it securely and safely. OK, let's hear from you two, and then we must go on to another question. Yes.
Peter said that you know what you're signing up for, but you can sign up to Facebook at the age of 14. Yeah. And there are 14-year-olds and younger, because there's no way to prove that you're 14 when you sign up, who are living their lives out on Facebook. They are communicating every little thought through Facebook, and that is going to go down. By the time they're of voting age, or age where you can really give consent, you've already accumulated 4 years of embarrassment.
How do you prevent it?
Well, I just think social media could be a great thing. It's a great idea, but it's too easily corruptible.
OK. And the person next to you?
Quite frankly, I'd say this is a storm in a teacup. It's that a website is using something like your date of birth and in your name to harvest an election and to change the way that the country is voting is ridiculous. You could blame everything upon something as ridiculous as this, as not getting a job. And if someone was to come to me in the street and say, "What's your date of birth?" I'd tell them. Would it make me change my mind?
You wouldn't find that odd if somebody approached you in the street and asked your date of birth?
Maybe I would find
that a bit weird.
I would find that a bit weird, but at the end of the day, what can they do with that information? You are your own person. You give that information. If you don't want to give it, don't give it. Don't sign up to the website.
Okay.
And when it comes to elections, you've only got yourself to vote for.
OK, well, date of birth, we may come to dates of birth in just a minute. The person up there, I'll just take one more point. For the woman with spectacles there.
Yeah, it's a lot more than just your date of birth, and as well, it's not just you giving it. One of the things with Cambridge Analytica is that your friend could use an app, and that app could harvest the data of all their Facebook friends.
Exactly. You're
not giving consent for that if your friend's using that app. So how can that be informed consent?
OK, let's go on. Thank you. So we must crack along. Like Parliament, though, we take a break over Easter. We're back on the 12th of April in Liverpool, and the week after that in Chesterfield. On the screen there, the details of how to apply. I'll give them again at the end of the programme. Right, let's have this question, please, from Tanvi Kishore.
Grandma is to blame for Brexit, but since when did youth trump experience?
Grandma is to blame for Brexit, but since... So you think Grandma might be right?
Perhaps.
Perhaps. OK. Stuart MacDonald.
Well, Granny MacDonald was always right, and it was a very brave man who told her otherwise. But to cut to the thrust of your question, I think Brexit is a mistake. And I deeply regret the fact that the United Kingdom will be leaving the European Union. Of course, the part of the country I represent, Scotland, voted by over 60% to remain a member of the European Union. So what do we get as a result? What is the least bad option we could possibly hope for? Well, we believe that that requires us to stay in the single market and the customs union. Every piece of economic analysis that has been done, whether that's by the government or independent of government, tells us that Brexit is going to cost jobs, it's going to disrupt living standards, and it will cost prosperity for decades to come.
Do you accept,
So
sorry, I don't want to interrupt you because we hear a lot about Brexit and the arguments for it, but the question about youth and age, do you believe this Financial Times analysis that in 3 years from now, if this referendum had been held then, it would have gone the other way?
I'm not sure.
Was it a young person?
I haven't myself seen it, but I think it's generally accepted that young people are more pro-remaining in the European Union. I'm not sure if the panel would argue with that, but I think that is generally accepted. So what I would say is that don't shut yourself off to remaining outside of it forever and a day to come. No one generation can bind another. And if a future generation decides that its future lies with its allies and friends in Europe, as it has done for decades in the past, then let's get back into it. You'll have allies in the SNP should you choose to do so.
OK, you, sir.
Should 16 to 18-year-olds be given the vote?
What do you think?
Yes.
You think they should? And you up there? Yes.
I completely disagree. I don't think that young people should be given the vote like 16-year-olds. I definitely think they should be a little bit 18. As a consenting adult, as that's at the age you can buy a house or get married on your own legally.
Was Grandma right to vote Brexit?
I do think Grandma was right, and another thing that annoys me is who says all these young people didn't vote for Brexit? All my friends, all under the age of 25, all voted Brexit. All my community voted Brexit. All most people I know voted Brexit. Most of the North voted Brexit. So it really, really drives up when politicians are saying that the young people didn't vote for it. The young people did vote for it. We know what we voted for. We voted to leave the customs union. We voted to leave the single market. We voted to take back control. We don't want a jobs-first Brexit. We want a people's-first Brexit. That is what we voted for. We wanted democracy back, and that should be the basics of it. Not about jobs, not about economy, not about living standards, about what people want, about democracy.
But the statistics from the polls that were done showed, I've got them here, that 73% of people under 24 voted to remain.
The same polls that said that Brexit were going to win and for Remain were going to win, and the same polls that said the Conservatives were going to win a majority in the last general election.
No, but they were done afterwards, asking people how they read. But, you know, you may be right.
I hear it all the time and saying young people didn't vote for Brexit, but all
your friends voted Brexit. Okay.
Most of the North, everybody was voting Brexit. I struggled to find anybody that lived near me that voted Remain.
Shamish Chakrabarti.
I completely respect how you voted and how people all over this country voted, however it was that they voted, but you cannot have a people's first Brexit, as you call it, if you're not looking out for jobs and services and human rights standards and all the rest of it. And on this, if I may, on this point, the central question about whether youth trumps experience, younger people are going to live with whatever deal we get or don't get for a much longer time than I'm going to have to live with it. I passionately believe in votes at 16. At 16, you can join the military, you can get married with parental permission, you can pay tax. What happened to no taxation without representation? We need to start bringing the generations and the regions and countries of the UK together.
On the question of the vote, you know that large numbers of Labour members want another referendum. Would you favour that?
Well, we can keep having referendums until, you know, one side or the other gets what they want. I kind of believe in parliamentary democracy. That's, you know, that's the kind of democracy that I think produces better results.
Peter Hitchens.
Well, speaking as an old person, I can confirm that you get more sensible as you get older. When I was in my 20s, I was a Marxist, Leninist, Trotskyist revolutionary, Bolshevik. And I had opinions roughly equivalent to those of Mr. Cleverly's Conservative Party now. which has become an extraordinary left-wing party since then, and I am now probably the last Conservative standing. The Financial Times of sliding scale seems to me to suggest that as people get older, they'll get more sensible and therefore probably more inclined to vote for more sensible policies. I just, whatever I say in this argument, I really don't want to get involved in a discussion about the European Union, because I have to tell you, I'm so bored with the subject and discussing it over and over again that I really don't see that there's anything left to be said. But on the question of youth versus age, there is absolutely no question in my mind that I had absolutely no business deciding the fate of the country before I was about 40. And I'm not entirely sure I've got much business deciding it now, but I certainly didn't have any business deciding the fate of the country when I was 25.
Right. Paris Lees.
Well, I hear that there's a lot of, pro-Brexit feeling in the audience, and I respect that. I mean, my family voted Brexit. I'm from a working-class town in Nottingham. It's not what I wanted. I wanted to remain, and I think that, the exit polls do show that the majority of young people did want to stay in Europe, and I find it sad that we're leaving, but I think ultimately, this is the Tories' mess. They wanted to have this referendum. This was to kind of settle an internal Tory party struggle, and I feel like why should we be left to deal with it, really? And
but Paris, what do you think about the youth age experience, which was the question that was asked?
Well, there was a great headline the day after the referendum result was made live on Vice, saying, Grandma, what have you done? And I mean, I personally do feel quite let down by baby boomers, actually. I feel that they're one of the most destructive generations ever. They came up at a time when it was free for them to go to university. They'd had a better living standard than anybody had ever enjoyed in human history. They had every possible advantage given to them. And now people are getting poorer, life expectancy is going down, and we're not going to be as rich as our parents. So I just see them, the people that are running everything at the moment in their kind of 40s, 50s, your Boris Johnsons, these Cambridge Analytica people, just seem completely reckless, completely greedy, completely self-interested. And I don't even think most of the people that are pushing for Brexit, I think there are genuine reasons for voting for Brexit, but I really question the motives of these older people that are kind of pushing it through for their own personal political gain.
All right, let's hear from you.
When we leave the European Union, we'll be able to set our own tariffs on goods like food and clothing, which will benefit the poorest in our society. So why are we shying away from that opportunity and not seizing it with both hands?
Hang on a second. Do you think there was a generational gulf? But do you think there was a gulf of generations on the decision?
Yes, I think at the time, but it's been 2 years and we've got past, we need to stop looking back and look forward. We are leaving the European Union. Let's make the best of it. Yeah. And instead of hearing, in spite of Brexit, let's hear this happened because we did it. We left the European Union.
James Cleverly.
We could argue all night about the pros and cons of the Brexit debate. We could rerun that. I kind of find myself agreeing with Peter on that. I think the moment for that row has passed. So what I think I need to do is to listen to the concerns that people have, and people do have genuine concerns about what leaving the European Union might mean in terms of the economy, in terms of our social links with Europe and the European Union, in terms of our personal links. Will we still be able to visit, meet, marry, fall in love, etc., etc.? And so what I need to do as a representative
falling in
of the
love
party
was never on the referendum.
No, I tell you, well, I've got lots of friends. I have got lots of friends who are married to or going out with people from Europe, and they have been concerned with some of the very, very inaccurate, and I have to say disconcerting rhetoric that's been coming out from the Labour Party in terms of
you voted Brexit.
I voted for Brexit. Yeah. So I think that as the party of government, the government has a duty to show you. There's no point in me trying to tell you. We have to show you that the things you value from the relationship with the EU economically, socially, culturally, etc., will be protected and enhanced. But, and the point you made is absolutely spot on, there are some fantastic opportunities that we have. My grandmother, one of my grandmothers, was from Africa, from Sierra Leone. And there are millions of people around the world who have long felt that Britain has been so focused on our relationship with Europe that we have lost track of our wider relationships with other parts of the world. I want to see us remain close to our European friends and partners, but I also want us to get back into the habit of also being close to Africa and Asia and Latin America and India and other places.
All right, then. Shami? James, on the subject of what people value and what I value, and I'm genuinely saying this to you, not as your opposition, but as a citizen in this country, one of the things I value is the Good Friday Agreement and the peace that it brought us in Northern Ireland. And if we're talking about people having been irresponsible around Brexit, I have not heard a solution to this question of whether there's going to be a hard border on the island of Ireland.
When I first joined the army, I used to have to get on my hands and knees every time I went to my car to check to make sure there wasn't an under-vehicle explosive device. So to imply that somehow we're being reckless... To imply that somehow we are being reckless. My party has disproportionately suffered the impact of terrorism from the troubles in Northern Ireland. None of us want to go back there. And I absolutely assure you that we are going to move heaven and earth to ensure that the excellent relationship we now have between the British government and the Irish government and the peace settlement in Northern Ireland is not just protected...
Wait a minute. Say that this doesn't jeopardise that. Are you actually trying to tell us that this doesn't make that...
I don't think we should go into the argument about...
No, I'd like you to answer. Are you really saying that it doesn't endanger peace?
And I also can't think you meant it when you said your party suffered. The people of Northern Ireland, surely, are the people who suffered.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I know what you're referring to.
Amongst political parties,
yes.
Amongst political parties, some of my colleagues were murdered. Some of my colleagues my previous colleagues were murdered in the Brighton
But peace in Northern Ireland, surely, is not a party political issue.
No, indeed. And the point I'm making...
It's an issue that's got to be negotiated, but it's not a Labour-Tory issue.
But the implication that somehow the Conservatives or those people who voted for Brexit were being reckless with that peace, I think is a deeply unfair assertion.
Let's go up there to the man with the... Yeah, you on the right, on the left there, you. Yes.
Wise men plant trees they'll never appreciate the shade of. This could be an absolutely fantastic opportunity to change trade across the world. Why are we hearing so much doom and gloom about why we should go back and change it, and why not look on a brighter side and say it could be a fantastic opportunity?
Stuart MacDonald, do you agree with that?
Well, I mean, look, I would love to share in the rose-tinted glasses that you seem to view this through, but let me say this. The damage this will do to the young people in this room, young people across the country, in terms of their right to go and freely move around Europe, study around Europe, jump on a plane and go for a drunken weekend in a European capital city, this will damage the younger generations. And I say this as well to James. The idea that when Nigel Farage was launching that great big... You remember the poster with all the immigrants arriving at the border? The idea that it was to stop the Europeans getting in so we could let people in from Latin America, from Africa and from Asia is a nonsense. This wasn't about trying to re-engage with the world. All this sloganising, this global Britain nonsense means nothing. There was never a plan for winning the referendum. And the two charlatans I blame for that the most are David Cameron and George Osborne, who, as soon as it got difficult and their chickens came home to roost, were off straight away.
I'm from Northern Ireland, so the fact that the border actually really affects me. And I know I'm only 20 and I know I didn't live through the Troubles, but, you know, obviously I know a lot of them. But I know for a fact, regardless, if the border changes, it will have an effect.
Yeah,
that's fact.
We are not going to introduce a physical border in the Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland.
The woman there, you in the middle of the... Yes.
So I voted to remain in the EU purely because of uncertainty. I feel like there's been a lot of facts and figures thrown by both sides that just don't add up and don't make sense. I study law, and academics across the board have all said that disentangling EU and UK law is going to take a long, long time. Okay. And that uncertainty for me is just not something I'm prepared for.
I'd like just to go back and we'll move on to Tanvi, who asked the question in the first place about grandmother and youth trumping experience. What is your view?
Well, first of all, I just think that my question got derailed a bit by the panel itself. The question wasn't about the technicalities of Brexit. It was about the attitudes presented about both the older generation and the younger generation and how they view Brexit. Post the Brexit vote and the referendum, you suddenly had this very vicious mood encircling that the older generation have destroyed our country, when in fact this isn't the case. And we've often had this sentiment, especially amongst young people, that, oh, we shouldn't be allowing older people to have the vote. When the truth of the matter is that in World War II, we fought tooth and nail so that everyone could have freedom. Now, the UK people exercise their right, and the fact of the matter is that we voted to leave the EU.
So, Grandma was right.
Indeed.
OK. Thanks very much. Let's go on to another question now, because we've got many questions here. Mohammed Ali Akram, let's have your question, please.
Should transgender women be allowed on an all-females list for elections?
Should transgender women be allowed on all-female lists? This is a proposal for the Labour Party on their all-female list to allow anyone who identifies himself as a woman to stand on all-women shortlists. Shami Chakrabarti, just set out the position as you see it.
Yes.
Okay.
I am a feminist, and I'm a member of a feminist party that actually has all-women shortlists, for a start. But I am not the sex or the gender police. Maybe I'm not woman enough for some people's taste, but I call myself a woman. Maybe I'm not British enough for some people's taste, but I am British. I am not going to be policing the boundaries between sex and gender and telling any woman that she is not welcome with me. And the Labour Party is an inclusive party where hundreds of thousands of people come together, despite their various beginnings and their various journeys, to stand up against discrimination and oppression. And that's why I think we've got it right on this.
James Cleverly.
As much as Shami is very proud of the fact that her party does have all-women shortlists, I'm very proud of the fact that my party does not have all-women shortlists, but has currently, we're now on our second female Prime Minister, so I think we're pretty much calling it right on that one. My view is that because I'm a conservative, not despite, but because I am a conservative, I believe very, very strongly in people's right to live the life that they want to live, to pursue happiness in whichever way gives them the best chance to pursue happiness. As I say, I'm not going to make a comment on all women shortlists because we don't have them. I think it would be unfair to do so. But I don't want to give away a secret, but Paris and I were discussing just before we came on air that I think at some point in the not very distant future, we will look back at much of this debate with the same bemusement that we will look back at much of the debate that was had about homosexuality in the 50s, 60s and 70s. I look forward to that point in time. There are trans boys and trans girls at the school that my 15-year-old and 13-year-old sons go to, and it causes no hassle whatsoever. The generations that are coming along behind us just don't get why we are getting so very het up about a particular issue.
Peter Hitchens.
Yeah, you can round it.
Well, I don't think anybody should have all women shortlists. I think the whole idea of closing or opening any such thing as the entry into politics or the entry into a job on the grounds of what sex somebody is, or indeed the grounds of what colour somebody is outrageous to me. I am a person of the 1960s, and we completely believe that people should be judged on only one characteristic, the one stipulated by Martin Luther King in his great speech, which is the content of his or her character. I don't want to know anything else And I think in judging whether people are fit to be selected for Parliament or any other thing, that is what you should be looking for. And the whole apparatus of all women shortlists and the rest of it seems to me to be an outrage against that principle, and we should abandon it.
Okay. Hold on. Paris, you'll know that a group's been formed by Labour members called Keep All Women Shortlists Female. What do you make of that, and what is your view?
I just don't know if I've got a lot to say on this particular question, David.
You surprised me.
Thank you so much for asking this question. Trans people are less than 1% of the population, right? And I don't know about you, but it seems like we're in the headlines every single day, and you'd be forgiven for thinking that we're responsible for all of the world's ills. Constantly, the debate about trans issues, trans people are framed as the problem. We're causing these huge problems to the rest of society. The sky's going to fall in, whereas all of the evidence suggests that the complete opposite is true, and that actually trans people suffer horrific violence. 45% of young trans people in this country, in modern Britain, have attempted suicide. Not thought about, attempted. I think we need an urgent public debate on who and what is causing these kids to feel so desperate and alone, and what we can do about it to protect them. Anything that a trans person does that is bad or could be perceived to be a problem to people, we hear about it in the headlines. Schools say that they're going to relax their gender policy, their policy for school uniforms. It's the end of the world. Kids are actually sitting there trying to kill themselves. Nobody talks about it. And you'll notice that I'm a transgender person. I am the only transgender person who's ever been on Question Time, because the conversation about us is conducted over our heads. It doesn't actually include the people who this conversation affects directly. And it's really interesting because Peter actually doesn't believe that trans people's identities should be respected. You wrote a piece for the Mail on Sunday criticising a school because they supported a child. You didn't think that they should be referred to with the correct pronouns. So you called that, referring to a trans person, are you referring to me with female pronouns? You said that that was an attack on truth itself, just simple, basic manners. And I think that that's what a lot of this comes down to, really. But
come to Mohammed's question.
The question of all women shortlists. It's so odd to me because in my everyday life, I'm respected as a woman. You know, people in shops refer to me as Miss, increasingly Madam now. Thanks for that. Give it a few years. My boyfriends have all been guys who've never dated a transgender woman before. Their families have accepted me. My friends accept me. My colleagues accept me. I go online and I see these awful, awful people purporting to be feminists, you know, you would literally think that I was Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator. And, you know, it's... bigotry is bigotry, whether it's dressed up as religion, whether it's dressed up as feminism. And these same legitimate concerns that we're hearing, I think some people do have legitimate concerns, but I think there's a very loud, vocal minority who are manipulating people's concerns in the same way that people did about the fear around gay teachers and linking it with paedophilia in the 1980s. And I think it's absolutely disgusting.
OK. You say... Yeah.
We're only debating this here tonight because we have allowed blatant discrimination on the basis of sex to become a criteria for nominations to Parliament by one particular party. It should never have been allowed in the first place. Every opportunity should be open to everybody, man, woman, trans, whoever you are, it should be open to you. And it should be complete, and it should be banned immediately, and we can just put all these sorts of debates to bed because it's just going to cause social problems down the road.
Shortlist should be banned. The all-woman shortlist.
The all-woman shortlist should be banned. Yeah. Where I'm from, I could not be a Labour Party candidate.
Where are you from?
I'm from the Dewsbury and Batley area.
Yeah.
I think it's a massive injustice. We cannot claim to be a fair society and allow this to be a part of our parliamentary democracy.
Mohammed, with respect, the reason why I disagree with that position and Peter's is that the status quo on this planet is not meritocracy. And women have been the bottom of the pile on this planet for thousands of years. Now, I respect James's party for having produced 2 women prime ministers, But Prime Ministers by themselves are not enough. And it's only because of all women shortlists that Labour now has more women in Parliament than all the other parties put together. And we're still not 50% yet.
Okay. Was it you who asked the question? Yeah. Where's Mohammed? Yes, what's your view?
Well, I just want to say that females, transgender females are females, and I don't want to listen to a bunch of people saying, a bunch of so-called feminists, when they're supposed to be for females, but they're not for females because they're saying these transgender women aren't females. So I don't want to support that. And Shami, I agree with your point. There's a disproportionate amount of females in Parliament, and we need all women shortlists to get more females in Parliament, because that's the way we get equality and we get females' voices being heard.
All right. Stuart MacDonald.
Well, it's a self-evident truth that trans
women...
The SNP
have anything like this?
Trans women are women. Yeah, we made a change in our party conference, I think maybe 3 or 4 years ago, to bring in, make it easier for women to have women shortlists where, for example, if I was to stand down from my seat, it would probably be an all-women shortlist that would replace me. But trans women are women, and I'm an openly gay man. The trans community have stood with gay and bisexual men and lesbians for decades. It's about time we get the finger out and showed them the same solidarity that they've shown us. And trans people face some of the most poisonous discrimination imaginable across the country. And I think that if we're going to... Paris is absolutely right that the conversation around this is very familiar to the conversations that were had around the early days of gay liberation and the comparison of gay men to paedophiles in schools and all the rest of it. We need to learn from this kind of history. And can I say as well that it is a real privilege and honour to sit beside Paris tonight, who has done immense work to tackle this, and all power to you.
Okay.
Can I just add one final... Thank you for the show of solidarity. And the issue of all women shortlists is one thing, but we do need to get more women into politics. But the solution is not bashing trans women. And there's some really, really mean bullying being carried out under the name of feminism. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we actually all pulled together? Because it's not a slice of the pie where it's like trans rights are at the expense of women's rights. That's not how rights work. That's not how equality works.
Right. All right. We'll go on. Thank you very much. Michael Whitcock, let's have yours.
Is it time for Europe to turn its back on Russia?
Is it time for Europe to turn its back on Russia? Well, let's go to this. James Cleverly.
I think that...
Boris Johnson seems to be doing his best to make sure it happens. I don't know.
I think the events in Salisbury were a real wake-up call. We have seen... an attempted assassination on British soil that has pretty compelling evidence, very compelling evidence of state involvement by Russia. I think the response by the Russian authorities, both in Russia itself, in the Kremlin, and the British Embassy, I think has been inappropriate.
Can I just pick up on one thing? You said pretty compelling evidence. Is it absolutely certain in your mind that Putin and his government were responsible for this?
I haven't seen the intelligence reports myself. I'm not a member of the Privy Council, so I don't have the opportunity to see absolutely all of that. But the position that has been taken by our Prime Minister, by the President of France, by Chancellor Merkel, by a number of our allies around the world, gives me very great confidence that the assessments are accurate. Right. And I think the way that the Russian authorities have responded mockingly in some instances is not the behaviour of a country that is seeking to do everything it can to help another country get to the bottom of an attempted assassination.
So turning our back on Russia, which was Mr. Whittock's question.
Well, what we absolutely have to do is make sure we bring Russia into the international rule-based community, and there are many ways of doing that. We expelled a number of Russian diplomats. We've made it very clear that we are not going to have high-level representation at the forthcoming World Cup. What happens in the future, I don't want to speculate, because that will entirely depend on Russia's behaviour in response to the actions that we've taken, the decisive actions that we've taken.
OK. Peter Hitchens, what do you think about Europe turning its back? What does that mean, and how could it be done?
I'm not sure what it can mean, because Russia is in Europe. It is a major European country, and to pretend that it's not there would be a major mistake. I do not have Mr. Cleverly's total confidence either in the intelligence services or in the information that they have, but I'm fairly sure that there is no other explanation of the events in Salisbury than that some sort of Russian agency was behind them. So let's get that behind us for a start. But I do happen to think that the Western countries have, since 1991, when I watched the Soviet Union collapse, when I was in Moscow, since 1991, have been doing their very best to rub Russia up the wrong way, to poke it in the eye, and to taunt and ignore and generally misbehave towards it. To the
your
point,
examples
to the
being,
point,
your examples being what?
Let's for a start, the expansion of NATO, right up as far as we can get it close to the Russian border. So there are now NATO troops in Narva, which is 85 miles from St. Petersburg, which is the same distance as Coventry to London. It's not something that the Russians were ever likely to be pleased about, and it was, in any case, it was the result of very powerful lobbying of the US Congress by the United States arms industry, which, when the Cold War ended, found it had too little business. The other problem with it was that at the time, George Kennan, the most experienced expert on Soviet affairs and the man who invented the Cold War, warned desperately against this expansion of NATO eastwards, a warning which was ignored and which has caused immense trouble ever since. This is far too little known. And we've done this repeatedly, provoking. And the events in Ukraine in 2014, when Western governments openly backed a violent mob putsch against the legitimate government of the Ukraine, because the legitimate government of Ukraine was non-aligned, and we wanted a government there that was pro-NATO and pro-EU, and we got one. That was also a disgraceful act of aggression by us against Russia. These things seem to me to be passing by unknown by most people in the West. They have no idea how Russians view this. And this isn't any kind of defense of the Russian regime. I'm talking about ordinary Russians who are concerned about their own country and its safety and security, and who view themselves as being under threat. And we should recognize this. Turning our back on Russia is going to solve nothing. I think we should recognize that Russia actually has a case for its own self-defense, that we've ignored it and been extremely tactless and stupid towards Russia for a very long time indeed. And if we actually want to have good relations with Russia, we could consider much more carefully how we behave towards them.
Stuart Montgomery.
Well, to get to the question, I don't think you can turn your back on Russia. I think you have to look Russia in the eye. It's a menacing force. We cannot have a situation where it can be behind potential murder on the streets of the UK, and that goes unchallenged. So the question is, what do you do? Well, for a start, what we've been calling for, and there is a consensus, to be fair, across the parties in Parliament, is the clamping down of millions and millions of pounds of dirty Russian money that flows through primarily the City of London. We need tougher money laundering laws for a start. But one of the things...
Sorry, do you agree with what Peter Hitchens was saying, that a lot of this is the fault of the West in the first place?
No, I don't buy that. I mean, I read Peter's rather brave defence of Mr Corbyn's stance. I think his article was earlier this week, if not late last week, and I think it was slightly tone deaf. Russia is a menacing force. Mr Putin is
could you elaborate on
Mr. Putin is a thug. Okay. He runs his country with a gang, with all the instruments of a normal state that any other Western country has. That should cause Russians concern. They should be concerned for their safety. Because we couldn't have a forum like this.
Stuart, they are concerned. Can I just,
Peter, I didn't interrupt you.
Let him just interrupt you for a moment.
You said something about me, which I haven't as yet done about you. But I am going to make this point here. We go on and on about Russia's regime, and Vladimir Putin is a sinister tyrant. I repeatedly say so. I don't defend Russia's regime. This country has daily friendly dealings with sinister tyrannies in China, the People's Republic of China, whose leader has just declared himself president for life, whose government kidnaps its citizens abroad, which runs a gulag, which drives its dissidents to early deaths by constant harassment and house arrest. Right. It's a disgusting country. Our politicians,
You've had your interruption. I've got to keep you moving.
Bowing to Saudi Arabia. Right. So we have no stance to complain about Russia's regime. The question is Russia...
Okay.
The question is Russia a country with a gross domestic product the size of Italy's and defences 1/10 the size of NATO's a threat to this country?
Peter, thank you.
Actually, no. It's been my pleasure.
Stuart, just finish your remarks because I want to...
Clearly, it is a threat to this country. Now, what happened in Salisbury is not a classic Article 5 attack from another country, but is an attack that's not unfamiliar to the Baltic states. And it's something that we need to get to grips with and realise this is the new and differing threats that we will face.
All right.
And if we don't take that seriously, that's a very dangerous path to go down.
I'd like to make a distinction between the Russian people who are getting ripped off and who are subject to human rights abuses every day. A distinction before you build the bear and the menacing force. I'd like to make that distinction between the ordinary people and the kleptocrats and the plutocrats and a very authoritarian and human rights abusing regime. And I think the consensus should be to go after the money, including the money here, whether it's money, dirty money that's come as a result of human rights abuses or non-taxed rip-off money. And I think we should do that, not just in relation to Russian money, but other dirty money too. And in relation to chemical weapons, we should go through the international convention and we should perhaps challenge Russia around its stocks of weapons, but go through international law and not just, forgive me, Stuart, not just all this tough talk that's demonising people in a whole state, but go through international law.
Sorry, I've got to stop this. We're coming towards the end. Paris-Lees.
Why are we not talking about the Tory party's links with Russia? You know, the Tory party is awash with hundreds of thousands of pounds of Russian-linked money, and they're not being held accountable. Jacob Rees-Mogg's fund investment firm has got investments with a Russian bank with sanctions against it.
What's that got to do with this issue, whether we should turn our back on Russia?
Whether we should turn... Well, I just think it's all right, you know, Theresa May sending these diplomats back and, you know, in the theatre of it all and everything, but it's deflecting from the real connections that the Tories are getting money from these oligarchs, you know, people who have dirty money from committing the most horrendous human rights abuses shouldn't be able to funnel that into Britain. And what I would ask you, James, is would you promise on television that your party won't take any more money?
Well, we had this discussion last week.
Money?
Very briefly, James, I just want to bring in the questioner before we end.
We only take donations from British citizens, some of whom are from Russian background, by Russian birth, a number of whom have come to the UK to escape the situation in Russia and the abuses by some of the Russian authorities.
No, I don't want to debate on this. We talked about it last. Let me just answer you and then we move on.
You say about...
Be quick, please, James,
yes,
if you would.
I will. And you say about being held to account by it. The fact is all registered and in the public domain and we are discussing it is us being held to account.
Michael Whittock, what's your view? You asked the question.
Like Peter Hitchens said, having, you know, advertising Russian exiles here is only a red rag to a bull, isn't it? You know, last week Chris Grayling got off so lightly. It's not about the legality of Russian money, ex-Russians giving money to the Conservatives. It's about a bigger question like Saudi Arabia. Is it morally right?
All right. Thank you very much. I'd like this to go on, but we can't go on. That's all from us. Question Time's off now for 2 weeks. We're back on April the 12th. We'll be in Liverpool on the 12th of April. The week after that, we'll be in Chesterfield. 0330 123 9988 is the number to call, or you can apply to our website. The address is there. As you know, if you want more on tonight's topics, you can join Adrian Childs right now on Question Time, Extra Time on BBC 5 Live. My thanks to this panel, to all of you who came to Leeds to take part. Until 3 weeks from now from Question Time, good night.